I'm Alan Gerding, and this is the Tuesday Night Playcast, the show all about the stories we make while playing the games we love on, around, and even under the gaming table. We're going to be playing Into the Odd, a role-playing game by Chris McDowall. And when I say we, who do I mean by we? Well, I mean my business partner, Sean McCoy. But who is going to be hosting, GMing, refereeing, wardening, whatever you want to call your Dungeon Master galore? Well, the creator himself, Chris McDowall. And before we play, we're going to ask Chris a few questions. Whoop!
My name is Chris McDowall. I write stuff at Bastionland.com. The games that I've done that I'm most well known for are Electric Bastionland, which came out a couple of years ago, and Into the Odd, which was the game that came before that and is the one that's currently being remastered on Kickstarter. My thing is rules light, flavor heavy, having the absolute sort of minimalist approach to rules and stripping back as much as possible, but trying to get as much flavor and character into every little bit of the game.
Delicious. Sean, how are you doing today?
Brill. I'm co-founder of Tuesday Night Games with Alan. I'm most famous for designing the Mothership RPG, whose box set will be kickstarting on November 2nd of this year, right after Chris's finishes. So there's no overlap there. You should all go
Very
out
kind of you to
buy
wait.
Both.
I was worried.
No, not at all. We need all the time we can get, but we're coming up against the wall where it's either like shit or get off the pot. And what about you, Alan? What are you most known for?
Oh, thanks. I'm most known for probably hosting this show. So if you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, because we try to release a video on YouTube every Tuesday. Also known for psychology. I have my own personal psychology videos on my own personal channel. Oh, why hello there. I'm Professor Gerding, and this is your psychology class. But game design wise, I did 2 Rooms and a Boom with you, Sean, and we developed and published games like World Championship Russian Roulette, That's Not Lemonade, and as Sean already mentioned, Mothership, the sci-fi horror role-playing game. Now that we have a basic introduction of who we are and maybe we've captured some people's care, can I grill you a little bit, Chris, about Into the Odd?
Yeah, go for it.
So I imagine this is probably one of the most common questions. You mentioned that you had Bastionland about 2 years ago, and I have my copy right behind me. What is the difference between Into the Odd and Bastionland? What's the relationship there?
So the way it started is Into the Odd was the first game that I did that got any kind of like print release. It's the first game I ever like asked people for money to have. Before that, I'd done lots of kind of free games, but this was the one that caught people's attention a bit and actually justified like a little bit of a print release. That's the game that kind of started it all for me, really, in terms of like professionally designing games. The whole point of Into the Odd was that I wanted it to be a very small book, very simple rules, very straightforward, sort of self-contained. Then when that was done, I started working on what I wanted to be a supplement to that game. So something that sort of had a lot more of the kind of exploration of the world and just extra options for players and things that you could use with the game. But the problem is when the rules of the game are sort of like one page, I felt bad not just putting them in the book. So Electric Bastionland started as a supplement, and then eventually I thought, well, I'll just put the rules in the front of the book. And then I thought, well, I'll just change the rules a little bit because there's a few things I want to change. And then it's its own game at that point. So it's like a thing that grew on the back of Into the Odd and then fell off like a big, horrible heap of flesh. And that is now finished. And I look at it and I think, I thought, this is it. I'm done with that idea now. But then a lot of people were asking me about Into the Odd, saying, oh, I still play Into the Odd. I've got Electric Bastionland, but Into the Odd, some of the things that it does differently, I actually prefer. I sort of went back to it, decided to give it another lease of life. The original book was sort of like a softback print on demand, very sort of sparse artwork in there. So I thought now that I've got a bit more experience in making these things, we could make it a bit more a luxurious book that sort of does justice to the game itself.
I feel that's the case with almost all forms of art, is that the artist looks at it and thinks, I could come back and do better. And it's really difficult not to come back and dive in. When we talk about paintings, that's considered a cardinal sin, to go back years later and like repaint over it. But the beautiful thing about publishing books and RPGs is you can go back and tinker it. So as a consumer who owns Bastionland. Do I even need to get Into the Odd Remastered?
So some of the reasons that people said, oh, I still play Into the Odd more than Electric Bastionland, part of the reason that people would say that, it's kind of two different prongs, really. One is very practical, which is it's much smaller. Electric Bastionland ended up being this giant book because it was like the first one that I published myself. So I went overboard with like making it huge. I'm very happy with that, but it's not entirely practical for everyone to carry around all the time. So Into the Odd is intended to be much kind of more, it's like digest sized, 144 pages, I think we're looking at. So it's much more kind of throw it in your bag, take it with you. And the other thing is Electric Bastionland is all built around the idea of I wanted to kind of enable people to make their own content. So I didn't want to include a load of sample stuff when it comes to sort of dungeons and locations. I wanted to instead sort of include guidance and procedures so people could make their own stuff. But Into the Odd instead has kind of like a ready to go sample adventure at the back. Again, it's literally like you can grab it and go. You can run this dungeon kind of without any prep. It's got that kind of more self-contained format to it. And the other thing is Electric Bastionland, I did sort of go a little bit more into the kind of slightly whimsical, dark humor sort of thing, overtly sillier, which I like. But if some people want a slightly more industrial horror kind of tone with like weirdness rather than overt silliness.
Yeah.
So that's it's got a slightly different sort of tone to it as well. So to answer your question, yes, of course you should buy it if you've got Electric Bastionland.
Right. And for me, what's really resonating the most here is the theme difference that you just talked upon. You're talking about whimsical because what is it? The squid herder or squid catcher?
Yeah, a squid bagger.
Squid bagger, even better. The squid bagger, that character alone has a type of whimsical, comical reference to it. I could see a whole Disney movie all about a squid bagger. But in Into the Odd, you're framing as industrial horror. What is industrial horror?
When I started working on Into the Odd, so it was about 10 years ago that I did the first play tests of this game.
Congrats on the 10-year
anniversary. Yeah, it feels like I've come a long way since then, which is good. It kind of started as like a D&D hack, like so many things do, like kind of very much based on like basic D&D. And I knew that I wanted to change a lot of the rules and make it its own kind of game, but I was still working on kind of an assumption of like classic D&D fantasy. From there, I wanted it to have more of a horror kind of edge. With horror, I find if you make the world feel a little bit more relatable, sometimes that makes the horror elements more horrific. I deliberately kind of moved the kind of setting forward into a slightly more modern thing, and a natural kind of place to put it for the kind of horror tone was like the sort of equivalent of like the Industrial Revolution kind of era. So you can justify there being like a big city. People still have like jobs and lives and horror in their everyday lives, but their lives are a little bit more relatable to what we have today. So when you have like weird things happening on top of that, makes it feel a little bit more strange and out of place. It's so hard to like relate to like the more like I sort of read about like the reality of like medieval life, it's like it's already too alien for me to like relate to. Like if I was going to do that in a game, I'd probably just want that to be the focus because there's so much weird stuff in there already. So yeah, I wanted people to have rent to pay and they had to go work in a factory, and you know we can all we can all understand that.
When I hear industrial horror, I automatically go to children working in factories and getting their arms caught in the gears and having severed arms. Sean, what do you think of when you think of industrial horror?
I think of the band Nine Inch Nails. I think of Peaky Blinders a little bit too.
Yeah,
I just think of like gritty, oil-soaked Birmingham and like smokestacks and chimney sweeps. This like oppression of like capitalism is sort of newly born and hitting everyone, and like everyone has to work. The bright side is like everyone can work. We're not all like farmers or whatever. We have some disposable income for the first time ever. When I play Into the Odd, I'm always thinking of like almost like a Moscow bombed out, smoke rising everywhere. There's like some army around, but you're not sure like where they're from. I'm picturing like Prussian uniforms, and you are opportunists. You're just people in this world trying to survive, and there are really no rules. It's got this post-war feel to me where it's like you have weapons, you're somehow you're a little bit more immune to danger than you would have been 10 years ago. And so the kinds of things you need to do to get ahead maybe aren't as unpalatable as they used to be. You've got to put bread on the table. You got to get through the next 24 hours. And if that means you need to venture into some sewer and kill some weird bag monster, like that's what you're going to do.
And there's definitely a kind of like desperation innate to that kind of setting. And I think that helps to kind of drive the players forward. The idea of like an adventurer in a kind of medieval world is kind of sometimes quite tricky to place, because the relationships between like how much people were allowed to be individuals were kind of quite different.
Picture like Kafka or like Dostoevsky, just like desperate people, Gogol or whatever, who are just like running around. They've murdered someone's after them. They're not sure who. There's snow on the ground, blood on the tracks. Like that's the kind of desperation I picture when I think of Into the Odd specifically. Electric Bastionland has this more metropolitan kind of vibe to it, but Into the Odd is just always so, maybe it's even the rules. The rules are so slim that even has a kind of desperation to it.
The way that you have your character kind of fits into that because for those unfamiliar, when you roll your character, all you get is a starter package. So there's no classes or, you know, you're not going to be a strange species of like anything weird. You're going to be a human really, and you're going to have 3 or 4 things. And that's kind of what defines you. So it does kind of nudge you towards being like these weird loners that have kind of just like found things lying around, like they've managed to salvage a few like odds and ends that don't necessarily fit together. Yeah, and you've got to find a way to make that work.
So enough foreplay. Today, we're going to go ahead and run through some encounters with pre-generated characters that you made for us, Chris. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I rolled these just on the standard character creation system. So your characters have got 3 ability scores. You've got strength, dexterity, and willpower, which are pretty self-explanatory. If you need to make a save, you just need to roll a d20 equal or below the ability score. You'll have some HP, which is your hit protection, which is sort of how well you can avoid taking a serious hit, if you like. And then you'll have a few items. One of you does have a weird item, which we'll get to once you've sort of introduced your characters, if you like. One of the things that I'm always interested in with this game is it leaves lots of blanks about your character. 3 ability scores and like some random items, but then it's up to you to kind of work out what that means for the character. So I'm not asking you to come up with a backstory, but if you would, do you want to introduce your characters now?
That sounds great. I think it is important to note for those people that are so familiar with the D20 system, unlike that, you want to roll lower than your ability score. Whereas a lot of people think D20 system, oh, I rolled a 20, that's excellent. Here, that's going to be a failure, because you've just rolled above your ability score. Sean, You want to start introducing your character?
I'm Gizzard.
I've got a strength of 8, so not a great strength. I've got a dexterity of 17, very, very dexterous, agile, lithe, and a willpower of 10. I'm an average, feeble-minded sheep in this land. I've got a musket and an accordion, and I have
no nose.
How did you know that you didn't have a nose, Sean? Is that just a character choice you made?
It says on my sheet.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it says that on your sheet in your description? I was just
the starter packages you get, some of them do just have like a weird detail like that. That sort of generally, if you roll high, you will get like some kind of disadvantage, and if you roll low, you'll get some kind of good thing. So I think because Sean got quite a high dexterity, the nose had to go.
I love it. And I'm Volta. I'm relatively strong, dexterous, not a lot of willpower. I have my trusty musket, a hatchet, but I also have a hawk. And I have a moon lens. Chris, what the hell's a moon lens?
Because you rolled quite low, you ended up with one of these special items which are called Arcana. So you have an Arcanum. There's like 36 of these that you might get when you create a new character. And the moon lens, let me get the description here. Look at 2 objects and ask a question. The lens highlights the one object that best answers the question. It cannot predict the future. These items are kind of inspired by like the kind of weird magic items that people always remember, like portable holes, immovable rod, things that just do something weird. They always work, but they're not always useful. It's up to you to make that useful.
I hope in our encounters today, I'm able to do the moon lens justice. And my hawk, it doesn't say if it's living or dead. I'll just say that my hawk is alive, but not all that healthy. My hawk's name is Volta 2. So I got 2 on my shoulder. Volta 2, V2 sometimes I call him, but he doesn't really respond. He's not too healthy. Gizzard, how do Gizzard and Volta know each other?
I think we met in the bread lines, and I had no nose, and you had a hawk, and obviously that was schemers at first sight. Let's put these 2 things together and make some money.
Here's my suggestion. Maybe you accuse my hawk of eating your nose. Sure.
Yep.
You asked me if that's the hawk that ate your nose. No.
I get into a knife fight. I lose my nose. Your hawk dives, eats the nose.
There
Best
you go.
friends for life.
Now we've got our story solid with our characters. Chris, take us away.
Bastion has always been the only city that matters. In its industrial age, it sits as the smoke-shrouded hub of mankind, surrounded by a world of lurking horrors and cosmic interference. The underground spreads beneath our feet, and the stars loom above. You are an explorer, braving places too far for maps and too old for records. Your expeditions touch the bizarre, wondrous, and horrific. You search for riches, but also arcana, mysterious devices with unnatural powers. Prepare yourself for a rules-light, flavor-heavy game of industrial horror and cosmic strangeness as you venture into the odd. I mentioned about the sample adventure in the book, but I thought I would just throw you into the middle of it because previously this dungeon just had one floor, but it now has 3 floors in the remastered edition. So I thought I'd just throw you in straight into the middle. So the two of you wake up. You are in sort of waist-high, salty water.
Ugh.
You sort of come to and sort of both kind of wake up roughly the same sort of time. You don't remember how you got here. You are sat sort of waist deep in this salty water in what appears to be a sort of vast underground lake. You sort of catch your bearings. One of you is clutching a lamp, and you have some sort of rope and climbing equipment as well. But other than that, you're kind of like clueless as to how you ended up here. The cave you're in is pretty big. It's pretty dark. Volta, you can sort of smell, like I say, you can kind of smell this kind of salty sea aroma. Obviously, Gizzard cannot smell. Other than that, you're kind of quite disoriented as to why you're here.
V2 has the lantern. He's holding it in his beak, we'll say. Gizzard, I smell salt water. I think this may be seawater. I know you can't smell too well, so why don't you give a taste? See if this tastes peculiar to you. Gizzard, did you want to taste the water?
No.
No.
Freaking high. No, I already don't have a nose. I'm not going to also lose my sense of taste by
Is the
drinking
water
this strange
rising?
water.
The water's not rising. I mean, as you even pass your hand through the water, you almost can't help but like brush up against, like, this lake is just like teeming with life. Tiny little shrimp crawling around under the water. There's little, like, the cleaner fish coming and just like pecking at your legs.
Ugh. Is there a tide at all, or is it kind of calm, or is it just sort of like?
It's pretty calm. Yeah, there's no visible kind of tide, but it's maybe like bobbing slightly, but nothing too serious. But you can see that to the north, this cave does have a sort of wide tunnel that continues towards the north out of the water. And to the east, there is what looks more like a kind of, it's a natural cave, but this looks more like a kind of a corridor that's been kind of carved out, leading into the darkness.
Do you want to send V2 on a spy mission?
Sure. V2, give me the lantern. And V2, fly! Fly into the darkness.
Which way are you sending him? Are you sending him through the big tunnel or through the little corridor?
A little corridor to the east, I believe, V2. To the east.
So he kind of like flaps his wings and like glides off into the darkness. Tell you what, give me a D6 roll.
I rolled a 3.
You hear him sort of squawk as he goes in. You sort of wait for him to return. He's not come back, but you can hear kind of occasional kind of squawking from in there. It doesn't sound like he's in distress. He doesn't want to come back. He's staying in there.
I think he's telling us that we should follow him there, Gizzard.
Yeah, okay.
All right, let's start making our way through the water towards the east corridor.
Okay. So who's going first? It's kind of wide enough for 2 if you want to go side by side.
Side by side.
Yeah.
So as you sort of head through, Gizzard, I'm sorry to keep describing these smells that you can't enjoy, but Volta, as you get closer and the light starts to illuminate the room, you can see that Volta 2, the hawk, is perched on the ground, and he's kind of got his claws in something, and he's tearing at something that's on the ground, and you're met with kind of the smell, a rotting smell coming from the room. And
He's got my nose.
You can see now ahead that what he's pecking at is a corpse that's on the ground. And there are 2 such corpses in the center of this room. It's kind of like it's still a natural cave, but it's much smaller than the one you were just in.
Are we out of the water now?
You're out of the water now. You're on ground. Yeah. So to the west is the way that you came. Continuing to the east, there is the corridor kind of continues out of this room, and there's kind of a sweet smell coming from down there. To the north, there is another corridor that goes off, and you can hear like trickling water coming from on there. But in this room itself, as well as the two corpses on the floor, mounted on the wall is it looks like a suit of like old-fashioned plate armor, something that you might see like ceremonially worn, but not sort of modern body armor. And it's been mounted to the wall, and it's got a kind of slightly purple hue to it. And it's like a full plate mast helm armor.
Well, I would like the armor, Volta.
You want to put on armor that we just found in cave?
Yes.
All right, well, I'll watch while I do this. V2, when you've had your fill, come back to shoulder. V2.
So I'm going to go try to get the armor down from the wall and check it out. I think Gizzard is picturing that this is rich, noble armor. Definitely would protect us for now. And if not, maybe fetch a pretty penny on the black market when I get out.
It's kind of mounted to the wall by like two like hooks that kind of go under the armpits, and it's kind of all held together. So are you just going to pull it down?
Yeah.
Give me a strength save.
I want to roll under. I rolled over by 1. My strength is 8.
Yeah, equal or under would have done. So you failed it by 1. You sort of pull this armor, and as you sort of get it off the hook, it's actually much heavier than you expect, and you kind of fall back and drop it to the ground, and it sort of lands with like a loud clattering of all this sort of metal plate hitting the stone floor. From the weight of it, it feels like there's still a body inside it. It's still lying on the ground motionless, but you hear this kind of clattering echo through the caves. You hear like echoing.
Full of a chuck.
Knew it was coming. Yeah, you kind of hear like a gurgling noise coming from actually from the room that you were just in. With the water.
I think there's somebody in this armor.
I also think that something might be coming from where we once came. So I'm going to kneel here next to one of these corpses and take aim towards the west from whence we came, just to see if anything will come, and place my lantern. And I'm telling you this, Gizzard, so you know what's happening. I'm going to place my lantern slightly more to the corridor to the west from whence we came, so if we can see anything before it's on us. So
I will, just telling you, so you know,
okay.
I'm going to pull the helmet off of this guy to see what we're dealing with here.
You try and pull at the helmet. The helmet feels kind of like fixed almost to the body, but you're able to lift up the face guard, and you can see there's just like a desiccated corpse inside. Like it's been there for a few years. It's not completely rotten yet, but it's just like almost like mummified and like dried out. But it feels like the arm is kind of almost stuck to it. You might be able to get away with a bit of time, but this gurgling noise that you can hear kind of what sounds like wet footsteps slapping against the stone floor coming from that direction, from the lake that you came from.
Okay, I will take up a position in the dark near the entrance, and I will surprise this intruder. When they
Don't
enter
say
the room.
that. You won't surprise it if you're telling me this. Why don't you just do it?
Good idea, Volta. So instead of telling it to you, what I'm gonna do instead is I'm just gonna go over there by the tunnel.
So yeah, Chris, I'm gonna sort of stay out of the light. I'm gonna head towards the tunnel entrance where we hear this wet slapping coming from, and I'm gonna pull my musket out and take aim as well.
So you can see shambling up from that direction. You can make out 3 figures. They look like they'd probably be taller than you, but they're like hunched over. They've got these kind of long, floppy limbs. Other than that, kind of relatively like humanoid looking bodies. As you sort of try and get a glance of their head, you can't make out any features on the front of their face at the moment. And you can see each of them is dragging what looks like a chain, like a sort of barbed chain. They're sort of gripping in one arm and sort of dragging behind them. And that they haven't seen you yet. So what's your plan? Are you just going to let them come into the room, or are you going to fire on them in this corridor? Or are you going to call out to them?
Since I'm a distance back from the entranceway, and since Gizzard has his back against the entranceway ready to aim at anything that comes in, seeing this opportunity for an ambush, I'm gonna shout, "Announce yourself or be shot!"
You sort of hear them stop. There's just like a nonsensical like noise coming from the corridor. They sort of like wait a moment, and then you hear them start to sort of creep forward again.
Freeze or I'll shoot!
And as they get closer, you can see that instead of where you're sort of looking for a face, it's like their entire head is almost like a fish's eye or like a squid eye, just like with a big pupil, slimy white of the eye in place of where you would expect to see a face. And they have these kind of like slick, pale skin down their arms.
Gross.
And yeah, they're right at the entrance to the cave now. So they're probably sort of you probably could take a shot at them now if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, let's light them up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So are you both shooting at sort of the lead one?
I would not, because I would know that Gizzard would probably shoot at the one that would first appear. So I'm going to shoot at one that's next in line, if that's
Okay,
enough.
so if Gizzard is shooting at the first and you're shooting at the second one, they're aware of at least one of you, but I would say they're not expecting Gizzard to be lying in ambush. Gizzard, your attack is enhanced, which means normally you'd roll a d8 for a musket, but you're going to roll a d12 this time.
Ooh.
I'll very briefly explain how combat works really quickly. So you're just going to roll for damage. So if you're using a musket, that's a d8 for damage. There's no rolling to hit. If you cause enough damage, the target runs out of HP. It's assumed that you have hit them, and it will cause damage to their strength. Initially, damage will be taken off their HP. If they still have HP left, they're fine. But if they've run out of HP, any remaining damage comes off their strength score. If that happens, they need to pass a strength save using their new strength score, or they will effectively be dying or dead.
Does that work for us as well?
Exactly the same for you. So if you run out of HP, any remaining damage comes off your strength score, and you need to make a strength save.
Chris,
Right.
I got to say, I come back to this time and time again as one of my all-time favorite combat systems. Initially, when I was working on Mothership, I thought it worked so perfectly for a horror game. I wanted to steal it so bad, but I couldn't bring myself to do it.
I should have done it.
No, just forever and forever. I always will think that this is one of my favorite combat systems that I've ever seen. So just really well done.
Guess people will just have to buy Mothership and Into the Yard, and then they can
Get
do
the
their
full
own.
experience.
Yeah.
So, Sean,
but-
you're rolling enhance. Am I rolling my regular d8 then?
Yeah, so we'll do one at a time. So Sean, if you can roll, sorry, Gizzard, if you can roll your d12.
I got a 7 damage.
Oof. So that is definitely enough to hit. So your musket kind of blasts through this thing. You're kind of like the exit wound kind of blasts through the side of this creature.
Ooh.
And you see this kind of like almost like phosphorescent blue goo just hit the wall. It just crumples to the ground lifelessly. Its big dumb eye just like looking at you. So the first one is completely obliterated. Volta, you are shooting at the next one in line,
Yes.
and yours is just regular, so you'll just be rolling a d8.
I rolled a 5.
Not bad. So you do hit it. Your kind of shot sort of hits it in like the stomach. It's clearly hurt, but it manages to kind of like keep itself moving. But you can see this kind of neon blood kind of dripping down its body.
Ooh.
So the one that you shot, Volta, that will definitely be heading for you. I'll tell you what, Gizzard, can you give me a dexterity save, please?
Absolutely, I can. Pass.
So Gizzard, you're kind of tucked away enough that neither of them has really put two and two together that you're there yet. So you're still kind of hidden from them. So they will both rush towards Volta, which is bad news for Volta, unfortunately. So the first one will attack you for 2 damage. What would that take you down to 0?
That would take me down to 0 because my current health is 2.
At 0, you're fine. I mean, you're not fine. This is only going to get worse for you. But the first one kind of swings its chain at you, and you kind of manage to like step aside. But in stepping aside, you kind of step right into the other one that comes running up. It kind of grabs you with its big kind of soft hand. It just sort of thrusts this kind of chain into the side of your face, and it's got these barbs kind of scraping against your skin. So you are going to take 2 damage from the first attack and 3 damage from the second one. So I think you're going to lose some strength. Is that right?
Yes, my strength is currently 10, but minus 3, it's now at 7.
So you need to make a strength save against 7, or this could be the world's quickest game.
Rolling. I rolled a 14.
So you are down. You take critical damage. So it's kind of like pulling you up against the rocks, and then it kind of just like pushes you back, and you feel the back of your head hit the rock, and you're just down on the ground bleeding. So Volta, you are dying. You're not dead. Gizzard can still save the day, or potentially save himself. So Gizzard, what are you going to do? The one that attacks Alan is the one that's fresh. The one that's wounded is the one that's swung and missed. Between Volta 2 and Gizzard, what's the plan?
I'm going to try and get both of their attentions right now by pulling out my accordion and playing music, backing up into the tunnel that we came from.
So you're leaving Volta like on the ground?
Yeah.
So when something doesn't make sense for a save necessarily, there's a thing called a luck roll. People tell me they really like this mechanic, and I'm like, how is it even a mechanic? You roll a die and you want to get high and not low. So if you can roll a d6, please.
Sure, yeah.
And we'll interpret the result.
6.
I mean, so with it being a 6, I'm even going to say, as you start playing the accordion, it's a little bit waterlogged from your sort of trip into the water, and it's kind of making like a slightly horrible noise. The 2 remaining of these creatures lashing around like almost in agony at the sound of this mildly disappointing accordion music. But they seem to find it repulsive, sort of move away from Volta. They're kind of like shambling around the corridor, almost like they're drunk, and they're just trying to like get away from it and head back towards the lake. Are you going to carry on playing?
Oh yeah, just very aggressively.
So you carry on playing, and then before you know it, they are gone, and they are sort of like, you hear the sort of gurgling and you hear the splash of water as they kind of go back into the lake.
Okay, immediately I'm gonna attend to my friend and fellow rapscallion to see what can be salvaged of his situation.
So Volta is, I don't want to say fine. Volta is a little bit worse for wear, but you're able to kind of rouse him back to consciousness. He's got some like horrible blue blood smeared against his face, but other than that, and a bit of a head wound, but it's probably nothing. So you give him a drink of water. So you both get your HP back now, because HP comes back very quickly, but your strength damage is going to stay. So Volta, you are up and you've survived.
That was a close one, buddy.
Not feeling too good. I feel like I'm forever weaker.
I think almost dying to a random encounter is like the perfect encapsulation of this game.
It's one of my favorite things about our Electric Bastionland game we played too, because all your monsters tend to be completely unique, right? So I'm never able to put a name to these fish eye waterlogged beasts, right? And they only exist sort of in my imagination.
One of the things I thought about doing in the remaster was, I was like, well, an obvious thing to do would to include more monsters, like a big monster section.
Right.
But I didn't want to have them be standard. So there are more monsters, but they're like in the adventure. I make sure I don't give them names. They're kind of like description names. So it might be called like a hunched thing, right. Or like just something that's like a general description.
I love it.
I'll always remember we had this, like, what was that, Alan? It was like a tall guy in a trench coat. We've got these fisheye things with chains. We had the little heads that summoned water. Like, I'll never forget those encounters.
And if people wanted to watch or listen to what we're discussing right now, Sean and I previously did an adventure led by Chris McDowall, much like we're doing right now for Electric Bastionland. Where can they find that, Chris?
So that is on my YouTube channel. So it's youtube.com/Bastionland. And it was the Droner House. So if you want to find the Electric Bastionland Let's Play, that's called the Droner House. If you look for that, it's on youtube.com/Bastionland.
I never get to play, Chris, but playing in your games is some of the most fun I have. I really feel scared, which is a big thing for me. Alan's really good at this too. Alan can attest to the fact that, like, I really enjoy the high stakes and feeling like it could all sort of go to shit any minute. But even in this coral, what's this dungeon called again? The
Iron Coral.
The Iron Coral, yeah.
Beautiful. And Sean, the adventure that we're playing, the art that corresponds with it in the book is the art that is behind you right now.
Yeah, so there it is, the Iron Coral.
Chris, I have a question. So I love the Iron Coral in the original Into the Odd. This is going to be an expanded Iron Coral, which I think is great. I'm a big believer in adventures over systems. My weird question is, you have an industrial horror game, but the Iron Coral isn't like a big factory. It's not like a mine. I know you're sort of just remastering the old one, so you didn't want to switch probably the dungeon at the end. Was just this sort of like a dungeon you were running at the time? Was there any thought you put into it in terms of, no, I don't want it to be a factory? Where did that come from?
So the world of sort of Bastionland, which is, it's the same setting in Into the Odd and Electric Bastionland, but as the name would suggest, in Electric Bastionland, it's a bit more kind of early 20th century in feel, but it's the same world with the same elements. And one of the big elements that's in the name is the city of Bastion, which is kind of like the center point of the setting. A lot of people ask, like, why is the sample adventure not in Bastion? Because that's like the jewel of the setting. Because I wanted this to be like really accessible and straightforward. No matter what you do with the city, it's always slightly like messy, and it can be a little bit tricky if it's like the first time you've run a game. Like, I would never suggest someone who's running a game for the first time, like, jump straight into a city. I think it's sometimes quite good to just start with a quite self-contained kind of classic dungeon environment. And, I wanted to do that. So that suggested more putting it in like the sort of the deep country part of the world, which is like the whole world outside of Bastion. So anywhere outside of a city is technically part of like deep country. Yeah, so I wanted it to have a kind of more rural, slightly kind of wilderness feel, so that the players are then perhaps striving towards getting to Bastion, which is kind of like the natural endpoint of this kind of sandbox that I've created. I wanted it to have that kind of feeling of the place that it's set is kind of quite lonely and bleak, and there's lots of stuff going on, but it still has that feeling of like when you go to some like bleak places. I try and draw a lot on my own surroundings. So when you go to some places in the UK now, they're very bleak and isolated places. And I wanted to tap into that because that's what happens when you have a city. Is like the side effect of having this giant city is that everywhere outside of the city kind of suffers one way or another, and that's kind of one of the big kind of tensions of the setting, if you like. So yeah, it's reflecting the sort of the other side of the coin of the industrialism, if you like.
No, I love it.
So the place that you were, this room that you were fighting in, with the armor on the wall, let's assume they've explored a little bit further into this floor of the dungeon, of the coral that they are in. The next room that they come to, you've entered from the west. To the east, there is a corridor leading out of this room that sort of looks like it's twisting slightly, almost like in like a, like the fairground, like fun houses. So not actually twisting, but just like as you look at it, your eyes almost have that effect.
Corkscrew, yeah.
To the north, there is a wide corridor leaving this room, and there is just a foul stench coming from that direction. And in this room itself, there are some sort of smaller pools. It's like a natural cave, and there are some small pools that almost look like small versions of the big lake that you woke up in, but they're sort of like lightly bubbling. Almost like rock pools that are slightly bubbling, a slightly stinky smell coming from them, like a slightly rotten egg kind of smell coming from these pools. So what do you do?
Volta's gonna come up and investigate one of the pools, looking closer without actually touching the pool.
Yeah, so you look over it, and the smell kind of like almost burns your nostrils slightly, so you kind of move back.
This room seems fine to me.
But yeah, Volta, you're kind of met by like the kind of sulfurous ammonia kind of stink coming from them. But looking in, you can actually see the water's quite hazy, but you can kind of just about make out the bottom of each one. And one of them does have something in there that looks like either a large white rock or something that looks slightly out of place.
I want that rock.
I don't recommend reaching in. If you have something to pry it down, that would be my suggestion, Gizzard.
Let's use your moon lens.
All right, well, how about you pull out your accordion, and I'll ask the moon lens if your accordion or this object is, whatever it may be in the water, is more valuable.
Yeah.
So you kind of hold the lens, and I guess like maybe like the light shines through it. So there's like a light kind of beam coming from the lens, and you kind of focus it. And as you shift it, you notice the light is concentrated on the pool itself. So it's pointing to the pool.
Well, it seems whatever's in there's more valuable. So you get it, Gizzard. Careful, don't stick your hands in if avoidable.
How deep is this pool?
I would say less than elbow depth.
What if we use the butts of our muskets, like giant chopsticks, and tried to lift it out?
Yeah, are you going for that?
We have rope too, you
Why
said.
don't you use your own musket first, just to make sure it doesn't do anything tremendous?
I'll dip the base in. It's like probably wooden stock, the shoulder stock. I want to see if it like just completely disintegrates.
So you dip it in. It doesn't seem to like be like corroding the wood or anything like that.
Gizzard, can you just push with your butt of the gun? Your musket?
Just sort of like dig it up almost,
yeah,
like
just
against
like
the
a
side.
shovel.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna like hoe that rock and sort of try to bring it up.
So you kind
How
of,
big is it? Like a bowling ball or like a?
I would
a
say
pumpkin?
like a
Just say
Watermelon?
skull
like a
shaped.
medium-sized sourdough artisan bread.
Okay.
One thing
It's
that always
quite, it's sort of
fascinates
like
me,
oval shaped.
people's references for size have always just been an incredible insight into personality. I feel like that in and of itself is a projective test. Like the 20s
You
question.
I was trying to meet you guys as well. I'm making vast assumptions.
You said a skull. I said a bowling ball. I used to work at a bowling alley, and I said an artisan sourdough loaf.
It's a little bit clumsy, but you're able to do it. And you sort of like, as you kind of get it balanced up and you're just kind of flopping it out onto the ground, presumably.
Yeah.
It sort of rolls over, and first you think it's a skull, but it's a sort of elongated skull. It doesn't look like a human skull, almost like it could be like a horse skull, but it's kind of too human. It is like a beautiful like ivory white, like it's been polished almost,
Ooh.
like marble white almost.
Right into the knapsack, just right into the whatever pillowcase I'm using as a bag.
You're just picking it up and putting it straight in.
No, I think I'm gonna sort of try to work my bag around it and then cover it. You know, we're seasoned crypt robbers, so I'm gonna work the bag around it, knock it in.
Yeah, so you sort of knock it into the bag, and yeah, you've got it.
This will keep us in borscht for months, Volta.
You know someone who's gonna buy a artisan loaf-sized skull?
No.
I don't know how lucrative the skull selling business is unless it isn't human, so maybe.
We'll go to Bastion and we'll find one of the sellers on the streets of oddities and arcanum.
As Volta is talking about the skull, you feel a kind of trembling from within the bag.
Oh. There's something in the backpack.
Do you think it might be what you'll just put in the backpack? Is that normal for your backpack? You're not.
I'm not a doctor. I don't know what skulls do.
And it stops now.
I feel like we should investigate skull more if it's shaking. That's not very normal. Should we see if it looks different? Maybe it ate your accordion or something.
You want to micromanage me?
So I
Do
take
what
my
you
backpack
want.
off,
Alright.
and I open the bag and put it in front of us, and we look in.
It looks like it's pretty still now. It's just kind of sat there. It's no longer trembling.
Let's say some words at it. I say,
Bastion.
So you're just saying the word Bastion to it?
yeah.
No, nothing yet.
We're gonna sell you.
No, it doesn't seem bothered.
Alright, V2, do your thing. See if you are strong enough to pick up skull on floor.
You see a V2 will pick it up. All right.
Yeah, send V2 to go ahead and try to pick up this skull. Retrieve V2.
So yeah, he kind of like goes and like clamps his claws like into its like skull, eye sockets, like bowling ball style, hefts it up, and I guess it's probably a bit heavy for him to be carrying around like a long distance, but he kind of like drags it towards you.
I guess it's sourdough loaf.
Thank you, V2. Good hawk. It's too heavy, so I have V2 come back to my shoulder and just leave it on the ground.
Leave it on the ground.
Yeah, but I'll go ahead and I'll pick it up. Sure. Like, all right, let's see. Then nothing happened to V2. Obviously, it doesn't seem to be toxic, so I'm gonna pick up and look into the skull's eyes. It's orbital
Yeah, you look
sockets.
into it.
Yeah, nothing happened. Nothing special. Good luck selling this skull. It doesn't seem to be shaking like you claimed, Gizzard.
Thank you. I put it back in the bag and put the bag on my back.
Right, where are you going?
So there's the corkscrew tunnel, and then there's
So there's like the twisty tunnel, and there is a really stinky corridor to the north.
Let's go to the north.
It smells really bad, just so you know, but okay.
You're just saying that to keep me out of there, because you know there's something good in there.
No, I'm just saying that because I'm starting to get a little jealous. Your missing nose seems to be more of a strength than a disability in this location. So
If you want to go in the windy corkscrew room where we're both at a disadvantage, that's fine with me.
now we'll go north, or whatever. Let's go in the stinky corridor.
I don't know why I'm really enjoying that these guys arguing all the time.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
start heading towards side by side towards the stinky corridor.
Arguing as you go, you kind of get into this other like natural cave. It is literally like a narrow kind of walkway around just a pit in the center of the room, and the pit is just filled with, it looks like it could be sewage or like bits of meat or an open grave that's been left for a long time. There's lots of different colors in there, but the stink is like absolutely disgusting. And yeah, the only way out of here is there's the way you came, and then there's a narrow tunnel sort of heading off to the right from the way that you came, or you're free to dive into this pit with noxious, horrible filth in it.
Gizzard, I hate to tell you this, but it smells delicious in there. There is something in this. Can you not smell that? I feel so sorry for you. I take back everything I previously said in the corridor. This is heaven. Is this?
Gizzard, you feel the sort of the trembling in your backpack again as Volta says this.
Oh, wait.
It's almost like something's like pushing into your back, like it's like nudging you.
I'm taking the skull out and I'm looking at it, and I say, my name is Volta. Does it do anything?
Yeah, you feel it slightly like almost like tremble slightly in your hands.
I say, I play accordion.
Yeah, it sort of lightly twitches and stuff, but that's about all it's doing for now.
Maybe not a lie detector. I bring it close to the pit.
You feel it kind of like almost like it's like pointing to it.
I think you're right, Volta. I think it does smell good in there. I think it smells so good that this skull can tell.
And actually, as you're holding it and you're saying this, you almost like feel it like nodding.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, I dive in with the skull. Let's dig around in this muck and mire.
So you leap into this pile of filth. It's just like as you sort of hit the waist, it just like gives way. It's just soft and like rotten, and you sort of like you can't feel any bottom and you're actually sinking in it.
Help! Help! It's trying to eat me.
All right, hand me the skull. Hand me the skull first.
I throw the skull up to him.
Good.
Now throw me the rope. The rope.
All right, I throw you the rope.
Gizzard, you're going to need to make a. Well, I'll let you choose whether you're making strength or dexterity on this one.
Well, I'll choose dexterity for sure.
This is just to grab the rope.
Yeah.
So you've got the rope, so you are now holding on. But Volta, you can almost feel him like being sucked down into this, and you see his head kind of go under. Are you going to try and sort of pull him back?
So I'm definitely going to pull. Should I do a strength?
Yeah, you definitely going to need a strength save for this.
Uh-oh.
I failed with an 11 since I only have a 7.
You have a choice. You can feel it just going, and you feel like for the minute at least, you're not able to like get a good grip. If you hold onto the rope, you're going to be right on the edge of going in yourself.
Volta knows 2 people in some type of quicksand shit is not as good as just one.
So you sort of see the rope getting pulled in deeper and deeper, and the last stretch of rope, you have to let it go or you're going to let yourself go. And the rope is kind of gulped down into this hole of filth. And that's the end of Gizzard, I think.
Gizzard,
No.
why'd you have to take my
me.
rope? My rope.
That's great.
My goodness, what was with that skull?
So it's a polished skull of alien bone, trembles faintly if you speak to it, and it can nod or shake its head, but it always gives the advice that will put the owner's life in the most danger. So it's just a bad
That's
advice
brilliant.
skull.
I thought it was definitely telling me that there was treasure in there or something like that. But
It
was
did
like,
its job.
Yeah, go
That's
in.
perfect.
And character creation's quick, so you could have been rolling up another character and you'd be back in the game.
Chris, thank you so much. Tell us everything good that's going on with you if people are interested in following you more.
So obviously the big thing at the moment is Into the Odd Remastered is now on Kickstarter. So you can find that on Kickstarter. Then else that I do, you can find me at bastionland.com. Regular blog on there. I do streams, podcasts occasionally. And there's a link to the Discord server, which is probably the best place to stay in touch with me. And if you're interested in Electric Bastionland, you can bastionlandpress.com.
And don't forget, all that information is also going to be available in the description of this video below. So if you want, just take a click and clickety click, click, click. Sean, go ahead and promote yourself too. Why not?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Sean McCoy. Additionally, you can go to mothership.rpg.com if you want to see the teaser for the new box set, or survivesolvesave.com if you want to be notified the second the Mothership box set Kickstarter goes live. All day today, I've been doing an AMA and Ask Me Anything on Reddit about the box set. So if you go to reddit.com/r/mothership.rpg, it should be pinned there. And I think it should also be pinned on reddit.com/r/rpg. And you can see all the answers, and maybe I'll still be hopping on later tonight.
All of that will also be in the description below, so you can just clickety click, click. And I think with that being said, this episode is
Finished.